Welcome to Soar Higher with Jason Ballard, a podcast developed for leaders by leaders to inspire you to reach your highest altitude possible by providing proven strategies, resources, and expert advice to accelerate your personal and professional success beyond what you thought was possible. Well, hey there, everybody. I'm Joel Weiland, and I'm joined in studio today by your host, Jason Ballard, and today we have the pleasure of having Ben Simmons from Schmidt Associates with us. And today we're going to be talking about the new office experience. How you doing today, gentlemen?
How you doing?
Man,
good to be here, Joel. Good to see everybody.
Man,
Ben, thanks for coming, buddy. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jason.
Man, well, friends, we've been talking just over the last couple of weeks, kind of just at a high level about the environment of the employee in the post-COVID world. What to expect if you are looking for a job, or what to expect from a management perspective if you're trying to keep your people around. Jason, give us just a couple words on that, on what you've seen, just maybe even recently, on the environment that people are finding themselves in the workforce today.
Yeah, the environment's dynamic. That's how I would describe it. Everybody's going through a lot of different types of things, you know, whether a small company or a big company. Everybody's trying to figure out what is the new norm. We've said that many times on this podcast, but what really is this new norm? Are we going to let everybody work from home all the time? Are we going to come back to work? Are we going to work hybrid so many days a week? Are we going to hotel our space and let people kind of come and go to the office when they need to based on their clients and workload and their personal needs? Or are we just going to go back to, quote unquote, the old way of doing things? One thing that COVID and the pandemic has really shined a light on is there are many, many ways in which we can do work. At the end of the day, whether you work from home, whether you work in an office or somewhere in between, it really boils down to one simple thing, and it's how do we engage people? Everybody's different. Everybody has different needs, different ways that they work better. Some people like, or early morning people like me, they get up and they, as the old Army commercial used to say, they do, more before 9 o'clock in the morning than most people do all day, and so some people like to work earlier in the morning. Some people are, like my wife, they're more night owls and they are more productive in the evenings and what have you. And so what is this right blend? And so if you're a leader, a CEO or a business owner, the question really is, who do I got on my team? What are all the things we need to get done? How do we need to best serve our clients with our products and services, and how do we leverage those resources and people and other things to maximize their potential and to put our company in a position to be optimal? And so today, I'm really, really excited to have Ben on the show. Ben's an architect, and he's had many, many conversations with people about design and how to set up people's environments to work best for them. So I'm excited about the show today.
Yeah, Ben, we're really excited to have you here to talk about all these things. Give us just a quick background on who you are as a person. Do you like baseball? Do you like football? And then how did you get into your current position at Schmidt?
Sure. Well, thanks again, guys, for having me. This is great. Ben Simmons. I'm an architect by training. I've been in the business almost 20 years. Have a little bit over 1 million square feet of corporate environments under my belt, probably. Live here in Louisville, grew up in Louisville. I'm a boomerang. I went to school at the University of Kentucky in the late 90s, came back in 2015, worked for a couple of different architecture firms in the region, left my my recent position at EOP Architects. I was a principal there. Left there about a year ago, saw some new opportunities at Schmidt Associates, joined them last summer. 2-second pitch on Schmidt Associates. It's a regional architecture and interior design firm with offices in Louisville and in Indianapolis. We're about 130 folks, all in under one roof. But we do have remote workers as well, really focusing on higher ed, K-12, healthcare, and my passion, my focus is really on the community studio, community projects, which is really where the workplace really dwells. So a lot of stuff we're seeing, and Jason is right. There is no silver bullet for this challenge, but there's a lot, and today we'll do that. We'll peel back the onion and see all the layers that you guys are talking about.
Yeah, and just as a little bit of background, I'm sure a lot of our listeners and just people in general have this kind of mindset or or foundational presupposition of what a corporate office atmosphere is supposed to look like, what it's look like for your experience, for maybe what your the job that your parents had or something like that. So tell us a little bit about just the mindset that people had going into COVID, about what a corporate office space was supposed to be like, what it was supposed to feel like, and then we can talk about how those things have changed.
Sure. A lot of it was really driven by brand and collaboration was a key word, a hot word. A lot of open office, you heard that one around, where it was less square footage per employee, based around cubicle models, and this they sold it as this open office collaboration style approach, which did work in certain areas. Certain creative industries really thrived off of that. But you still had challenges. You had acoustic challenges. You had privacy challenges. They would sort of streamline the individual workplace, but then amenitize the heck out of their real estate. So lots of collaboration spaces, small, medium, large conference rooms. You had social hubs and coffee bars and bike stations and showers and some. I mean, it was literally like staying in a hotel room or a hotel when you went to work. And in some places it worked really well. But as we're going to talk about, it didn't last, and there were reasons it's being challenged right now.
Yeah. So going into just 2020, something hit us that we weren't even remotely expecting. I remember my mindset in January 2020. It was not looking forward to what was coming down the pipe, but a couple weeks later. My job at that point was very much changed. Jason, what are, just in some of the people that you coach and things like that, what were just some mindsets that got changed real quick at the beginning of 2020?
Wow. That was all over the map. Some people were actually prepared.
Yeah.
There are certain industries that are more prepared for an economic disruption.
Yeah.
Right. So most people were cautious and concerned, and they're trying to figure out, how's this thing going to impact me? Where's this thing going? How long is this going to last? It was kind of, there was some fear there, some concern there, and how's this going to play out? Some people were like deer in the headlights. They didn't know what to do. They were just kind of stunned by it all, and they were kind of on the sidelines. Then other people were kind of opportunistic about it. They're like, oh, okay, this is going on in the market. Great. Well, now there's a need. I'll use Ford as an example. Ford went from, wide open, assembly line production, supporting people all over the world with vehicles, to making defibrillators. There's a local company here in Louisville that makes high-end sheets and stuff, like they're called Wicked Sheets. And, the hotel industry, a lot of their clientele throttled back during the COVID times, when they're thinking, well, you know what, let me just think outside the box here. What are the needs right now? Well, face masks were a big need, and being able to separate out people in the hospitals. Hospitals were overcrowded. There was a big need for different types of cloth-type materials, right, for cleaning, for masks and all this. So, well, they pivoted, created a new, work cluster, and so they took, instead of big sheets you put on beds, they cut those into little squares, put little rubber bands around them, and called them masks, and got them out the door and met the need. So some people were opportunistic. The IT sector was very opportunistic too, right? Because then, I'd say probably 80% of the world didn't know what Zoom was. Mm-hmm. They never used it, didn't know what it was, didn't know how it worked. How do we even figure this out? How do we sign up for it? Zoom boomed. And all the tech companies that support, companies as we know it today, had to go from in-place, work in the office environment, to getting employees laptops and things like that to take home with them and what have you. There's a CPA firm that I was working with, and they didn't have laptops. Everybody had desktops at the office, and they came in and they did their thing, and then they went home every day. And it was either issue out laptops and allow people to work from home, or go out of business. And they chose the latter. So it was a wide spectrum of people going through a lot of different things. And really people didn't know how long it was going to last. They didn't know what their options were. And so, folks like me help them kind of sort that out and figure out what's best for them.
Yeah. Let's drill down into that even a little bit farther. What were, from your perspective, Ben, what were just some of the expectations of the workforce that changed going into the pandemic?
Going into the pandemic, it was about it was about collaboration, where you came into the office and you had your day-to-day projects, you had your day-to-day execution, but it was usually around a team-driven approach. And a lot of times you were localized in the office to your team with a team leader or a project manager. And so even if you were in a larger organization, that was sort of distilled down to the teams that you were on relative to the projects that you were working on. And so even in the open office, there was somewhat of a siloing, because sometimes you would be placed on the same team for all of these different projects, and for the leadership to move you off those teams, they would have to, with some intentionality, look at you and say, okay, maybe you would benefit from learning these other approaches to other problems. Sometimes that happened, sometimes that didn't. But that was really it. You came in, you got your coffee. It was see your buddy at the water cooler or lunch, and just kind of get to work. And so deadlines were sometimes a little challenging, but I think it was definitely a lot of a push to get things done.
Yeah. So now let's fast forward 2 years. What are people expecting now in comparison to that? And I know that's a big question, but just give us a couple benchmark indicators.
Sure. I think the script is flipped almost 180 degrees. You saw a significant amount of the workforce look at their retirement options and say, maybe it's time for my quality of life to improve.
Yeah.
And so they retired early. So you had that happening. Plus, the talent itself started to pause and say, do I really want this quality of life forever? And you've had and since probably 2020, you have had a seismic shift in the workforce awareness. And employees are now realizing that quality of life is important. And maybe I can find the right employer who values the quality of life the way I value the quality of life. And that is becoming part of the value proposition that the employer now has to address, even as part of the interview process. And so work-life balance is becoming more of the balance and less of the work with a capital W and life with the lowercase l. So
I want to piggyback on top of that. That's a great point. One of the biggest things that I've seen coming out of the pandemic is companies and organizations prior to kind of treated everybody in this kind of blanket way, right? So here's your benefits, here's your pay, here's your computer, here's this, here's that, and your standard issue office, your standard issue kind of thing, and based on what they were doing, they would come and go and do what they needed to do and execute what their boss wanted to execute. Well, the challenge of today is we've learned that everybody is different. You can't lead and manage everybody the same. Everybody has different needs. And even still today, and I think this is going to be a problem for the next, probably 12 to 24 months, is we still haven't balanced out the needs of the employee yet, right? Child care and some folks, their folks moved in with them, and there's a lot of cohabitation going on right now. College kids that stayed longer than they normal because of the job market, graduating college. There's a lot of dynamics going on in this transitional period, and companies are having to look at people differently. How do we need to engage this valued employee and not cookie cutter that, not peanut butter spread that across the company, because different people, as we had Jeannie on, from our HR benefits company a few weeks ago, she said it best, people have different needs, and the folks that can personalize that to somebody's needs, to include the workspace and what they need at work or at home or vice versa, is important. So Ben, I'm interested to hear your take on how clients are engaging you to design their buildings externally and internally to shape the future going forward, and how we leverage our people and bring the best out of them.
Right. So the solution has to be a hybridized solution or a hybrid solution. But the reality is, real estate is somewhat permanent. You can't design a workplace to be this thing one day and then this thing the next day. There's just the logistics of that are almost impossible. So the notion of building in flexibility into the solution, flexibility of sort of addressing the needs of the employee while addressing the needs of the leadership at the same time, putting them on the same level. Before, it used to be heavy employer-driven, employee was secondary, and the employer would then message down to the employee, we're going to give you everything you want. Well, that's through the lens of the employer, right? And so a lot of the engagement that we're having with these leadership teams of these client groups are really actively going back to their constituents, to the doers of the firm or the organization, actively throughout all the iterations of the design, not just at the very beginning and not just at the very end to get a quote unquote blessing, but literally as the design and the conversation iterates, the constituents are kept up up to speed and are providing active feedback that then comes back to us, so that they feel like their voices are being heard, and we're engaging them. We can't have a design meeting with 40 people. It becomes very, very cumbersome to manage a room like that. So you have to layer it through the leadership team and trust that they are engaging their employees, their constituents, with best intentions, and then that feedback loop comes back to us in the constructive light to say, this is what Sally or Bob or Joe have all said, and then we can respond because we know that the leadership team is supporting that messaging back. They're not just put their thumbing down on it. They're actually saying, no, this is really important because this is how we're going to keep these people. Because if we don't engage them, then we have no assurance that they're going to be invested in this final solution. A good example too is one of the projects that we're working on right now involves a lot of hard wall or private offices, and this is because of a heightened need for privacy, both acoustically and just to have a one-on-one space with a client. Well, as we started to talk about this paradigm of really needing that private office to be really important, to have a great view, because and to have the amenities that employee, what I would call the star employee, the Class A employee, the employee that you really want to find out there in the marketplace and hire and bring on. We were putting a lot of emphasis on that space. What a colleague of ours in Schmidt Associates, in our own firm, came up to us and said, don't forget about who sits on the other side of that wall. Meaning, don't forget about the support people that are the secretaries, the folks who are putting all the paperwork together, who are having to support the person sitting in that nice private office. Because I guarantee you, if that support person leaves and that person in the private office is starting to have a difficult time, they're not going to stick around. And so what we call the equity of the wall, balancing the responses, not just to focus on that Class A talent, but also the Class A support people. I can tell you that was not always the case pre-COVID.
Yep.
It was a very one-sided approach.
We briefly talked about this before we even got on the show, but with the rise of online meetings, how has that changed the work environment? How does that make either the office space or the at-home office space look different?
Right. So before COVID, it was always about the first impression. What does the reception area look like? What does that lobby look like? It's really high-end finishes. It's really comfortable seating. It's someone offering you coffee or water. It's really having you settle into, this is what it's like to do business with this service provider. Okay. Well, honestly, now the first impressions, those first conversations, those first meetings are not happening in face-to-face settings like the conference room. So the clients who are coming to these service providers, they're not coming through the reception area. The first time they're actually meeting these service providers, it's actually over Teams or over a Zoom call. Well, think about that. When you're on a Teams or a Zoom call and your face is on the screen, every single time you want to see what's behind this person. Yes. What does their office look like? Because I can promise you, you may have books stacked high. You don't want to see like leftovers, beer cans, whatever. And so the notion of the first impression, which was before COVID really placed on the conference room or the reception area, is now being placed on these private offices, what I would call the back of house spaces. And think about that through the leadership lens of, okay, how are we branding this? How are we conveying a sense of consistent performance and excellence to these first-time customers? It's really neat. And it's funny, we were actually investigating furniture solutions for all these private offices, and you could tell all the photos online were all pre-COVID because it was always about the furniture, the sexy desk, the computer workstation, but the wall behind them was always blank. It was just nothing there. Yep. And so you kind of wonder, is the next iteration of the furniture solution or the branding solution going to be about what's behind you as you're sitting at your desk?
Do you see that changing anytime soon?
I think it really depends, because I'm not sure. Certain industries still like to have people come in, one-on-one, and it's really about the customer's level of comfort. Does the customer want to come in and be wooed, and shown around? I think it's going to depend. I don't know. I think some furniture folks will get smart to it and say, okay, this is what we can offer you, and it integrates branding and signage. And one customer, not one of ours, but a peer group, was telling us how they had to they got everybody into their private offices, and then after the first week, they had to literally write requirements around what you could or could not hang in your private office because some of these photos of you and your dog, getting crazy on the beach or something was behind you, and that wasn't quite sending the right first impression to those clients out there.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all heard plenty of stories of embarrassing Zoom calls with people that shouldn't have had something in their background or needed to not be wearing sweatpants during that really high level sales meeting.
Yes.
How has your job changed, Jason? Like I know that you, your vocation involves a lot of FaceTime. I'm assuming one-to-one conversation. What has it been like transferring to a probably mostly remote setup for you over the last 2 years?
Yeah. For my business personally, I'm normally out in other people's spaces. I'll go to their offices. I'll meet them. Sometimes we'll meet for lunch. We'll meet wherever they need to meet if they're local. A majority of the folks that I coach are not local. I coach people all over the world, and so I use the video calls, Zooms and stuff like that all the time, probably more than I do with more face-to-face. So, that's really, really important, and that's some of the things that I coach people on, right? Yeah. They look at, and I set my office up, my home office, where I do some of the remote coaching, right? And it's, it's got its own flair to it, and couches and pillows, and I got it set up nice. Looks like a nice executive office. Ben's familiar with that. But, how you brand it, the color of the wall, for me, blue and silver, are my branded colors, right? So I've got a blue base wall, and then I've even got my logo of my company, Soar Higher Coaching and Training, and then my tagline, soaring you to higher altitudes, is in the background. So when I'm on camera, people look off to the side. Next to my head is the logo, so it's constantly there. It's branded. It's professional and classy. And so, in this hybrid situation, you get people wearing more relaxed clothes. They've got the dog running through the, using the bathroom and the floor. You got kids picking their nose. You got all kind of stuff going on in people's, office environments or work from home environments. And, I tell folks, no, if you're going to do work from home, you got to put down some boundaries there, right?
Yeah.
You got to have a dedicated space. It's not at the kitchen table or in the middle of the living room watching, some talk show, Price is Right or something. No, you've got to have a dedicated space, and you got to be thinking about it from the perspective of not you and what may look nice for you. You got to think about it, what does other people see when you turn that camera on, you have a professional conversation? Do you adequately represent the brand of that company? Because you're representing the company. You're a person. Do you have the company polo on or a company shirt with the logo on it? Is there a nice professional, background, graphic, a little signage or something back there? One interesting thing about Ben's company, they just had a grand opening of their brand new office here in Louisville for Schmidt Associates. And so that was about three or so weeks ago. Ben was gracious enough to invite me. And so went up there. There's 200 or 300 people that showed up. Awesome. It was a great evening. Wonderful, wonderful office space. I wish everybody could see. It's a great example of how to leverage all of the office space as smartly as possible. They have a collaboration spaces. They have places where you can get around the big screens and have big group meetings virtually together. And they have, office spaces that are walled off and have doors on them and stuff. But even the backgrounds, though, being an architecture company, some of their backgrounds of their wall of what you look at in those sessions are some blueprints. I mean, it looks and is branded with the colors, and they got the logos and stuff in there. I mean, it's top notch. They thought all the way through that, and it's a great, we'll call it a architectural showroom for people to come and visit and say, wow, this is how you really leverage conference space, open space, collaboration space, and space where people can flow in and out of rooms if they need private space or, audio calls, video calls, those kind of things. So it's just a different world. You've just got to think differently about how you want to represent your company. And as an employee, while you are the most critical asset in that organization, you're still representing that organization. Whether you're walking through Kroger in the grocery store in the afternoons, or you're on a Zoom call, or you're in the office, no matter where you are, people know you're working there. You're wearing the company logoed shirts and hats and whatever else they gave you. And you've got to represent yourself in a professional manner there. I learned that a lot being in the military, because, I'm out and about. People see me in uniform, and, there's a standard and expectation you gotta have there. And I think that's true in the private sector as well.
Yeah. So describe, Ben, for us a little bit, like what does the new normal look like? We're kind of, we like to say this, knock on wood, we're kind of coming out of the pandemic. In so much as there aren't like governmental restrictions on where people should or shouldn't work. So what does the new normal look like? What do employers looking towards to either invite people back into a new office environment, or is this whole hybrid thing going to just kind of be the way of the future?
Well, I don't think there is an easy answer to that question. I think for the short term, at least for the next couple of years, it's too risky to lose top talent. Yeah. There's too many competitors out there who are constantly looking for the people that you have under your employ. So employers, the smart ones, are very sensitive to that. Either they've lost people themselves, or they know their colleagues have lost people. So employers now are becoming very flexible in the notion of the work week. And the term hybrid work week is out there. It's fluid, but even the hybrid definition is going to vary by industry. Mm-hmm. It's going to vary by company. So I'll just use Schmidt Associates as an example. We are full time in the office 3 days a week: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with optional Mondays and Fridays. And I commend the leadership for saying, look, right now, while many adults have made it through in quotes COVID with vaccinations and or gotten it, some of their children have not been vaccinated yet. They're either too young or for whatever reason haven't been able to, and so the family dynamic is still very real. And sometimes the kids get sick. Sometimes mom and dad need to take care of them or need to take care of an elderly family member. So just the flexibility of Monday and Friday, a lot of people have been really appreciative of that ability to decide for themselves, do I go in or do I stay home? Now, with that said, there are still folks in the firm that come in 5 days a week. Yeah. You have your project managers, your senior leadership, your front-facing group, your marketing, the folks that are really driving the ship. They are really putting a lot of value for themselves personally on face-to-face interaction. And I completely agree. Having tried to collaborate with my colleagues remotely versus in person, there is still no substitute for being able to sit across the table from someone, draw, sketch over, mm-hmm. iterate, go back and forth. There is an organic energy to that just is very difficult to replicate when you're on Teams. It's almost like when you're on Teams, you are on the clock, right? If you notice, there is like absolutely no room on Teams or Zoom for small talk. Like you were in that meeting, you're going to do it to the minute. And if it's a minute over, sorry, guys, I got to go. I got 5 minutes. I got to go to the bathroom. I got to jump off. And there is no water cooler talk at all on that. So what you're seeing now is a lot of companies are trying to find that middle ground, right? What's working for our teams? And I think so far, because everybody is super, super busy, yeah, there is a less of a emphasis on efficiency. It's not that the leadership doesn't think that there's an issue. They know there's an issue there. Yep. But they also know that they have so much bandwidth. And again, they don't want to put that added stressor on their employees because they're trying to retain as many as they can. Yeah. So they're letting it kind of ride a little bit. Where this will all potentially come to a head, though, is when things slow down.
Yeah, and I mean, again, knock on wood, it seems like there's some rumblings of things slowing down right now, economy-wise, just production-wise. What happens then?
So that's the gajillion-dollar question. Will attendance, face-to-face attendance in your office play a role if everything was equal? And if two employees were absolutely at the same level in terms of their performance, commitment to the firm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, except one came in 5 days a week and one came in 3 days a week, would the one who came in 5 days a week have a slight favoritism when it came to, okay, we need to let one of these folks go? Who's it going to be? I think the answer is yes, because that extra time in the office does sort of subtly suggest a heightened investment in the firm. It indicates a heightened investment in the self to say, I want to come in and learn the most that I can and be around my colleagues and absorb that sort of organically through what we call creative collisions, where you're walking back from your desk and you bump into somebody that you wouldn't normally see and you have a conversation that has an aha moment. You can't get that on Teams or Zoom.
But I'll challenge you on that, though.
Ooh.
Oh, here we go.
Here's a challenge for you. If all is fair and equal, I agree with you. However, just because you come in the office, just because you have FaceTime in front of your boss, doesn't mean you get results. Doesn't mean you're a top performer. Doesn't mean you get along with everybody. Doesn't mean you're a team player, right? So I think that depends on the person and their performance and their ability to, really exemplify their core values and their culture. Because people come in the office, and just because you're in the office, the boss may see them. That can be counterproductive. The boss can be seeing them at the water cooler too much, or walking around the building BSing too much, right? I mean, that can be counterproductive too. I think if you are a star employee and you're really motivated, you're there for the right reasons, the right heart, the right intentions, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, I think, in my opinion, from my personal, leading of 12 organizations and coaching, people all around the world, people can be high performers and remote workers.
Of course.
Now, I want to switch gears on you real quick. Let's talk about design of buildings. Okay, there are needs. Right now, the world as we know it as of May of 2022 is turbulent. There's a lot of unknowns, right? We're out of the pandemic, but we've got inflation, we got the economy stalled, we've got recession, we've got the price of everything under the sun going through the roof, like gasoline for our vehicles to drive back to work. So in some people's situation, from an affordability standpoint, for whatever reason they may have personal situation, them driving back into work may or may not be an option because of the price of gas. It's almost $5 a gallon. That's going to be a challenge, right? But as we go forward, I want to kind of break out a pandemic discussion, and as we design buildings going forward, there's still a lot of needs, right? Because employers need to consider the holistic time and life balance of the employee. So what I'm seeing, and I want to get your take on this and how you're designing buildings around this, people coming into work, whether it's 5 days a week or 2 days a week or whatever that number may be, or no days a week. What I'm seeing are employers are starting to create space where there's childcare in the building. They don't have to go, across town to drop the kids off and then over here and cut across traffic and go to work and, bounce all over town. They bring their kids to where if there's an issue, they can go down and visit with them. Mm-hmm. They can eat lunch with them, and it preserves some of that family dynamic. They're putting gym equipment and different kinds of like Google, right? Google's way out in front of this. They've got sleep pods. They've got bikes you can go outside and ride around the campus. There's lots of different things that you can kind of create around the space. How are you designing spaces going forward to accommodate all of these different kind of things and save people time, money, and effort and make it this kind of all-inclusive life balance kind of dynamic here?
Right. So the amenitizing of the workplace is not a new concept. That has been around, to your point, Jason, about the Google example. That has been around for a long time. Every pinball machines, any Cokes or snacks that you want, you can sleep on campus.
I don't like that, by the way. I hope that's not becoming more popular.
Right.
You can put a cot here, Joel. Come on. We got a great room here in the studio.
Yeah, that's right. And I think employees that are out there in the marketplace who are looking to make a transition, who are looking for a new home, I think they're smart to those spaces. I think they've stayed ahead of it long enough to know, okay, just because you go out and you buy a ping pong table doesn't mean your culture is one that I really want to be a part of. And so employees are kind of looking at that surface and going, okay, yeah, you've got the cool flat screen that's playing the Masters, or you've got the bourbon bar where we can have happy hour. That's still good stuff because it does encourage human interaction. Employers are really struggling to incentivize or entice an employee to make that commute. It's what we call commuter worthy, Are your spaces commuter worthy? And that's tough because in a city like Louisville, for example, the commute is 15 minutes.
Not from my house.
Well, as it compares to somewhere like DC,
right,
or a New York, where the commute is 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what is going into these spaces? It's not about checking spaces off like you would check this box. Well, we've got a ping pong machine and we've got bourbon, on Fridays, and every Tuesday we've got a chef that comes in and makes it's not that so much anymore. It's about what are we doing to support the culture of learning, to support the culture of mentorship, because people still want to continue to grow.
So are you designing more classroom spaces
Sure.
where coaches and trainers can come in and train and professionally develop people?
No. There's always going to be a need for collaboration. That is not. Don't think that's going away. What we're seeing though is a new kind of collaboration beginning to emerge. It is not the face-to-face across the desk with the drawing in front of you. It's what we call the quiet alone, or together alone, I should say. And together alone is actually something that we were just talking about internally with our CEO a couple of weeks ago. And that is the notion. If you notice, if anybody has high school kids out there or college kids out there, they go together to a coffee shop, them and their buddies, and they'll all study at the same table. But they'll study different things. They'll sit at the same table, but they'll all be on their phones, or they'll all be studying different things. And every once in a while, they'll bump their buddy and say, hey, look at this. So in a way, they're all alone, studying their own things. They're just together in the same space. And so that's a different way of thinking about collaboration. Before it was, we're going to get a group of 5 people, and we're going to sit around, and we're going to look at the same thing, and we're going to go back and forth. And so how that you still need the space, you still need the technology.
You're going to create a Starbucks environment in everybody's buildings.
Is
that one of the concepts?
You still have collaboration space, but it's how the collaboration space is being used. That goes to acoustics. Is it quiet? Is it like a library kind of space versus like a louder open office? You can hear paper rustling and people talking. It's got to be data, power and data. Like, you've got to have technology. You've got to have all the Wi-Fi in the universe, all the outlets for phone charging, and your 27 tablets and all your infrastructure there. But it's really about creating a space inside the overall office area that is different from your private office. As an employer, you don't want your employee staying in their private office the entire day. You still want them up and about, because if they become a mole and just stay in their private office, you're losing that ability to pull that knowledge out of their head and have it disseminated to the rest of your team. The best companies are leveraging each of their employees, but doing so in a collective way so that you're not starting over. You're building on the knowledge of each other. And it's hard to do that when you're separate in all these different home offices, right? Because you don't have that. So it's still about creating those spaces where you come together. I will be interested to see how reception areas and first impression areas evolve. Are they still going to be there? Does the employer still want to have the trophy wall with all the cool awards and, hey, hire us because we won this big thing?
Some companies are using like virtual assistants. When you walk up, they're built with AI and these different technology. The world will respond to you, kind of like the Siris and the
Alexas,
the Alexas and all that, where hey, I'm here to see Joe Blow, my attorney. 1 minute, please.
Yep.
And then there'll be some automation that kicks some light off in the lawyer's room to let them know somebody's there, and I see a lot of that kind of technology going on.
Yeah, you can see it in the multifamily space right now. With if we're living in an apartment and a buddy comes over, the buddy actually gets the security code or notification on their phone, so that they can buzz into the apartments without me having to come down. I could see that easily carrying over into the workplace, where the receptionist. We have a beautiful reception area in our new office, as
Yep.
you've seen. We haven't hired a receptionist yet.
Wow.
And that's because every time a client is coming, I am the receptionist. If it's my client, I am the receptionist.
Meet him at the door.
Yeah, you meet him at the door.
Ben does make good coffee, by the
do.
way. He's a pretty good receptionist.
So yeah, the technology of badging in or, you know, alerting someone who's you know, maybe on another floor to come down, that we all live so much on our cell phones now already. I have that can be an easy technology, you know, input that says if you're going to download this company's app that's going to have, you know, this just TLC thing of notification when you come on premise, and then boom, it escorts you all the way into when you shake hands or I guess click heels if we're still in COVID.
Yeah.
With that provider.
You know, the question is really, what is the experience that the customers need to have, you know, and it's all goes back to being, you know, the future really, regardless of buildings or whatever, is about personalization. Personalizing the experience to each and every customer. I think the same is true with the employees too. How do we personalize that experience? How do we streamline that? How do we leverage the technology? How do we leverage all aspects of the vertical and horizontal space in buildings to maximize that of the people and the facilities itself? I've even seen in like collaboration areas, they'll have big screen TVs on all the walls in these collaboration areas, and they're touch screen, right? Just kind of like your computer monitors or laptops or, you know, tablets and things are touch screen, and it's all connected to the servers and, you know, whatever, you know, technology and file structures and stuff that you have to access all your data, and you can just touch on them. You can pull up a conference. Hey, let's talk to Joe over in the UK today, and boom, they dial them up, get them on the line, have a conversation, and then get them off the line, and then they're doing things in kind of a high tech, innovative way, and all that data gets saved to, you know, you don't have to go to your office and email files back and forth, and all that stuff is interconnected and leveraging cloud managed services through IT that can be accessible anywhere. I think that's one of the lessons of COVID too, is, you know, you need to be able to work from anywhere at any time and have access to the technology, the applications, and more importantly, the data.
Yeah, that's a great point. It actually, where it manifests for us is really on the storage component. Some service providers have files and files and files dating back 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Now everything is done on the cloud. And so think about how much of a workplace is dedicated to storage that can be freed up because of the cloud approach. And there's still some security challenges. And these folks understand that and are doing the best that they can to invest in those protocols. But owners love the ability to have easy access to these documents. We'll just call them documents for lack of a better term. Documents on a cloud system any time of the day. It is an easing of the mind. There are some personalities that want to go over every line on that 300-page document. Others
like architects,
right? So just that notion of the cloud and having that access that's so easy. Yeah, that we're seeing that all across the sectors that everybody loves because it gets rid of the paper trail. It just shrinks that storage need, and it's always available. I don't have to go to the office to get it. I can just get on my phone or my tablet, and it's right there.
Well, friends, we're about out of time. Wrap us up, Ben, with just a couple things, just practical things that if I'm like a manager, if I'm a owner of a company, that I could start thinking about today that would lead to a better work environment for my employees, both to retain them and just to welcome them back to the office.
Sure. So on the real estate side, just because we're talking about a hybrid work week does not necessarily translate into a reduced footprint of your entire workplace, because you're still going to need to have area for those folks to come in on the Mondays and Fridays while your other permanent folks are in there at the same time. It's not necessarily a reduced footprint all the time. I would, this sounds self-serving, definitely consult with a design professional before you proceed with anything regarding real estate. There's just too many variables right now. There's, as you can tell by the conversations today, the solutions required layered approaches. There's not a single, silver bullet. And to the point about costs and time, both things, costs and time right now. The industry professionals have their finger on the pulse. They have to if they're good. Those come into play because what we're seeing now is delivery times are just as important as the cost of materials, because delivery times directly impact your new open date. And so if you're losing 60, 90, 120, 180 days, which is very likely because an electrical panel is on back order, would it be better to spend that extra money and get it 6 months ahead? That depends on your pro forma and how your company operates. But all of this to say, definitely consult the design professional. They just will help you out in a lot of ways that we're not even talking about here either.
Yeah. Well, we really want to thank you, Ben, for coming on the show today. I feel like, Jason, we might have to have this guy back on sometime in the future.
He's going to be on all the time.
I feel like we only scratched the surface of a lot of these topics, but yeah.
There's a lot more blood we can squeeze out of him, that's for sure.
Well, awesome, friends. Well, thank you so much for listening to Soar Higher with Jason Ballard. All of our social links, as usual, will be in the show notes of the episode for LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Please like and subscribe to the show. We're always looking for just ways to interact with our listeners. So if you got a question that you want to have answered, give us a message on one of those platforms. Email us. If you want to know more about Ben and what he does, check out the website for Schmidt Associates. That'll be in the show notes as well. If you're interested in learning more about Jason and his work as a business and executive coach, please visit soarhighercoaching.com. That's soarhighercoaching.com. And join us again next week as we provide more insight on how to overcome the latest business and career challenges people are facing in the workforce today. We'll see you next week.